So this is a quick tip video on the leading line component of the leading line framing assignment. And so right away, the leading line is defined by using lines, and it draws your viewer's eyes to certain subjects in a photograph. And in this particular image right here, the lines of the lasers tend to point straight to this performer, bagpipe artist. I don't know what you would call it, bagpiper. And so that's a good example of leading lines, but let's look a little bit deeper. There are two good places you can go on this site that give you other examples of leading lines, and a lot of times the leading lines point towards a subject, and that's really important that you're using the technique to highlight a subject. So I'm just looking down here to see all the different ways they've done leading lines. One important thing to note is leading lines can be implied. So in this case, it's not a line per se, but each individual post is implying a line, and then if you look, you see that there are many lines implied by that. So again, it doesn't have to be a straight line each time. You don't have to go and take pictures of only roads. The lines don't have to be straight. They don't have to be centered on your subject. There's a lot of ways that you can use them. So in some ways, when I look at this, I feel it's a little limited, that it's all about this vanishing perspective. But they are really good images, and there's a lot of places you can go to take advantage of that type of work. Here's one where it's a little bit off center, and this is a little bit different too, where it's using line, but this is a wide angle camera looking up. You can do that in a forest and get a very similar kind of a look, and now they're starting to break out of that. Every picture looking the same. These leading lines kind of move off into the sky. These are curved and follow the natural contours of the land, and again, try to be more open-ended on that. That's a pretty good shot. He points towards the moon, and again, if you have a strong subject and leading line, here's the leading. Then it makes it a stronger photo. Here's another leading line where all the lines are coming around the center, pointing towards the subject. Again, having a strong subject makes a really good work. Here the lines are time lapses of lights, and here again. So there's a ton of other images you can look at that are going to give you very similar kinds of results. That's kind of a cool way to work with it. Again, aiming towards a subject, aiming towards a subject. So that's kind of what you're going for. And if you just look at line, you see that line can be an artistic component that doesn't always necessarily lead towards a subject. And so if you can find strong subjects that have strong lines, whether they're curved, perpendicular, intersecting, spiderweb would be a good image to focus on the line of the spiderweb if you can catch the light of it, and basically being a little bit more abstract, but making the central piece of your photograph use line. So again, as always, here's a couple of examples from things that you can do just walking around the house and finding subjects. This is a leading line image. I don't know if these are leading lines, but I definitely was thinking of the fence post as a leading line, aiming towards my daughter Lucy. This one, you can see lines a little bit more implied. I guess the vertical ones are obvious, but there's also a line. I don't really have a strong subject there, unless you consider the man up in the rafters the subject. Whereas this one's a little bit stronger because the leading lines are guiding towards the subject, which would be the two daughters on the bike. And this was a good example of something a little bit more abstract, something that happens to be nearby my house, where I thought line was a strong component. And so again, I want you to feel like you can do that and break out of every photograph leading towards a subject, and every photograph being a road or train tracks or a line painted on the ground. And again, the line can be implied or kind of harder to see abstract, using intersecting lines to break up your image or create an effect. So the key thing here is to use lines effectively. And again, 30 photos, so try to make each of them unique and put them in a folder, label them so that there are at least 30 in your depth and breadth folder, and go ahead and turn that into Canvas. Like I said, next week I'll talk a little bit more about framing, but if you're interested, you can go ahead and look at some of the examples. The key takeaway, if you're going to go ahead, is to try to avoid using windows only as your frame. If you look at some of these sites, you're going to get a lot more ideas about how you can use hair or arms or organic things to frame your subjects, and that's what we'll talk about next week. So this week, please focus on leading line. Thank you.